Carol Marques, and with me today is Daniel Chung, who's running for Santa Clara County District Attorney. I wanted the opportunity for Gilroy to get to know Daniel better, and I invited him down for this interview at a friend's home. Daniel, it's so nice to have you here. I'm so glad you were able to come.
Thank you for having me, Carol.
I heard you had a wonderful debate the other night between your two opponents. I was able to hear some of the transcript, and you rocked it.
It was a pretty exciting debate with both Rosen and Khan.
Very good. Well, I know that the public would love to get to know your stance on different things and get to know you a lot better.
Sure.
Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name's Daniel Chung. I'm a career prosecutor. I've dedicated my entire career to public service. I started working as a prosecutor first in New York, focusing on gun crimes. After that, I moved back to Santa Clara County and worked as a prosecutor here, focusing on domestic violence and violent felonies. Santa Clara County, you know, this beautiful city like Gilroy, is home to me. I've spent approximately 20 years of my life here. I grew up in Milpitas, however, another fantastic town of our county. I grew up in a single-parent immigrant family. My mother and my maternal grandmother raised me. My father was in law enforcement and the military in the U.S. Navy, and he passed away when I was 8 years old. He actually committed suicide. So my mom raised me and my younger brother, and I attended both public and private schools throughout my life. In my junior high and high school years, I attended Valley Christian and Bellarmine. My mom took on a lot of debt to do that. And then financial aid and teaching jobs enabled me to go to Harvard and Columbia.
Wow.
And I got to taste a little bit of independence on the East Coast, spent about a decade out there, got to experience real winters and seasons, and Boston life and New York life, and really understand what it's like to live adulthood, and also be a prosecutor and attend law school and become a lawyer. But I ultimately came back to my hometown to serve. And I've been enjoying it ever since. And now I'm running for district attorney. And this is the first time I am running for anything in my life, besides, you know, middle school elections that I ran for.
Well, that's wonderful. You knew which coast was the best and you came home, right?
It's hard to beat the weather.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Daniel, why are you running for district attorney?
So this is my home community, so I deeply, deeply care about it. There are things that really concern me. One is the rise in crime. Violent crime and property crime are both up. I was even just looking at San Jose PD statistics the other day because, you know, San Jose is kind of the capital of Santa Clara County, you know, the most populous city. And if you look at the latter half of 2020 versus the latter half of 2021, robberies jumped by approximately 20%. Rape jumped by approximately 30%. And so this is insane. We are living in a time where it seems like there's just a revolving door for criminals. And, you know, the question that I think a lot of people are going to ask, and that I ask these days, is, do I feel safer now than I did 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 12 years ago? You know, DA Rosen has been there for 12 years. And has he made this county feel safer and objectively safer? And I think the resounding answer is no. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm really running to be the next district attorney. The other thing is, you know, I think a prosecutor's office, one of its highest values should be integrity. And I think over the years, over the last 12 years, DA Rosen has really eroded the integrity of his office by tolerating and by accepting things that I've mentioned in the past. For example, prosecutors who are sleeping with witnesses, withholding evidence, and thereby causing homicide cases to get dismissed. He's directing the alteration of timesheets and circumventing collective bargaining agreements. He's ignoring conflicts of interest and dropping the ball on serious and high-profile prosecutions. So to me, like, it's multiple reasons why I'm running. Like, the office itself needs to be cleaned up and to be held to a higher standard and to do prosecutions a lot better. but also we really need to strive for greater public safety. People don't feel safe anymore, and they want to see law enforcement that's responsive to their needs.
Sounds very good. I know we need a change in crime. Something has to be done about crime.
Yeah.
Why should voters vote for you and not the other two candidates?
So I think, one, they're going to look at how has the last 12 years been, right? Like I said before, they're going to ask themselves before they vote for Rosen again, do I feel safer as a result of DA Rosen having been there for the last 12 years? And I think people are going to say no, resoundingly no. So if they don't want the same of the last 12 years, they're going to reject DA Rosen. And so they're going to have two choices. And one choice is a public defender in the vein of Chesa Boudin, the new DA of San Francisco. And they're going to
getting recalled in June.
Who is probably going to get recalled.
Yes.
And they're going to ask themselves, do we want to try that experiment, which is spectacularly failing in San Francisco? And I think most people in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of engineers, a lot of smart people, you know, this is proof beyond a reasonable doubt that that's not going to work. And so they're going to look at me and say, wow, he is young, he's committed, he's a career prosecutor, he's serious about crime, he cares about integrity and restoring trust with the community, and he wants to change our community and bring it to a better place. And I think I'm going to be the best alternative that people have in Santa Clara County. There's only 3 of us running, sadly. And I think I am the best prosecutor who is suited to improve public safety and improve integrity in the office.
Great, thank you. I love that answer. If elected, what changes do you specifically want to make in the DA office?
So one of the big changes I've been advocating for is changing the way we think about charging. When I started in the DA's office in Santa Clara County, I was shocked by the lack of training and standards with regards to charging. And that's because there is not a vertically integrated system in the Santa Clara County DA's office. There is an issuing unit. And so a team of attorneys basically look at police reports in a very superficial, preliminary way. They don't really do a lot of follow-up investigation. They kind of reserve that for the trial attorneys later, and they just quickly issue charges. Sometimes I saw cases where there weren't even notes about what was issued, why it was issued, how they came to that kind of decision-making. And the analogy I've given to a lot of people is, imagine if in a hospital, doctors and nurses were never trained how to intake patients and how to diagnose patients, right? Like that's one of their main responsibilities, and they don't have training, they don't have standards. Doctors don't leave notes after looking at a patient or diagnosing them, and the next doctor or the next nurse has to reevaluate the patient all over again. That would be incredibly broken, and no hospital would ever tolerate something like that. And we shouldn't tolerate something like that in a DA's office, right? So in addition to really providing some clear training and standards with regards to charging and holding ourselves to a higher bar, we also have to vertically integrate the office. So I've been pushing hard for vertical prosecution, which means that one prosecutor takes responsibility of the case from the beginning all the way to the end, as much as possible, so that there's continuity, right? That DA now is responsible for gathering all of the evidence up front. You would be shocked to hear how many times we don't get 911 calls, video surveillance, photos, other media, because that first DA who had that first contact with that case, because he didn't have that level of responsibility and ownership with that case, just let it fall through the cracks. But if we have a vertically integrated system, that first DA who makes contact with that case is now going to have to care about that case, because guess what? If that case goes up in flames later, that's your case, buddy. That's the bad case that you issued, the case that you didn't investigate. And now you're going to have to take it to trial. So I think a lot of the ways I'm thinking about sort of reinventing and sort of innovating the office is really dealing with incentives. I think people respond to incentives. And if people have a reason to take ownership over cases, they're going to do a better quality job on those cases. And so those two are kind of the big reforms that I kind of want to create in the office. But obviously, there are so many different facets of criminal prosecution that we can talk about in the interview.
Right. But that gives us all a good idea that you are thinking of what needs to be changed to make things run more efficiently. This one is kind of a long question. Sure. What kind of transparency will your office have? Some district attorney offices across the state have released data on how many incarcerated people are being released and put back into our communities. Other offices have published letters of opposition regarding the early release of individuals. Will your office do the same?
I think transparency is absolutely critical. But in order to be transparent, first you have to collect all of that information. And one of the deepest failures of DA Rosen in the last 12 years is that he has not been up to date on technology in the office in terms of updating case management software and other softwares that will keep us up to date in terms of how Silicon Valley is going. We live in Silicon Valley. We create some of the most innovative, softwares that, change the world, right? Change our daily lives. And here we are in the DA's office having software where we can't even open up more than one document at a time. We don't even get an alert if a defendant gets rearrested, right? So even the prosecutors in the office are having a difficult time keeping track of what's going on. What is their cases? Who are the defendants? Who are the players? So we really need to sort of innovate in terms of IT in the office so that we can collect the data and really be on top of technological reforms in the office. And once we have that data, I think we should share it. As long as the law does not prohibit us from sharing it. Sometimes there are privacy reasons or confidentiality reasons where we can't share everything. But to the extent that we could share things with the public, I think it's fantastic. I think it would be great if victims could easily access a portal and they could see, this is my assigned prosecutor, this is his phone number, these are the cases, this is the next hearing date, this is where I should appear, this is the sort of latest progress with the case. How fantastic would that be? Like, as a victim, you don't need to call the front desk and be routed to 5 different people. Right. And if we could share documents, share updates, be transparent, I think that's fantastic. And I think that includes with the media also. I think DA Rosen has certain special relationships with certain media outlets. And I think that kind of favoritism is not healthy. Because I think it kind of creates like a quid pro quo type of situation where, in exchange for tips or things like that, they will give favorable coverage. I don't want the media giving us favorable coverage. I want the media giving us honest, fair, transparent coverage. Regardless of where they are on the spectrum, whether you're on the left wing or the right wing or somewhere in between, I just want you to report on the facts. And we'll give you what the facts are to the extent that the law permits.
Great, thank you. How will you address quality of life crimes?
They're super important. I think people have been really minimizing them over the years, saying, who cares about these small, minimal misdemeanor types of crimes? Let's just focus on the big types of crimes that happen. Well, like everything in life, things bubble up, right? And I believe that taking quality of life crime seriously is important for a DA, right? You have to care about both small things and big things. Sometimes you're able to intervene early because you catch people when they're committing these smaller level offenses. Because what ends up happening is that when people feel like, oh, I can keep getting away with these smaller offenses, again, going back to incentives, they feel like, oh, I'm not getting caught, I'm not getting punished. I can just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And that's one of the sad dimensions of our criminal justice system, which is that criminals are smart and they kind of know how to push boundaries. They know how to adapt to laws. And so they know how to sort of get away with particular things. And we shouldn't allow that. I think quality of life affects people's lives, right? So those types of crimes, however misdemeanor or small people might characterize them as, they're important to people. And they affect how people view their existence, their prosperity, the safety of their neighborhoods, how desirable it is to live here. Especially with the pandemic and everything, people are having second thoughts about living in Silicon Valley, right? They're saying, oh, well, why don't we live cheaper somewhere else with less crime, less taxes, etc. And we should care about those types of issues that will, encourage people to stay. Like their government, you know, your tax dollars are going to good use. We're being productive. We care about those issues just as much as we care about the high profile types of issues.
Great. All right. Thank you. How will you fight against rising crime?
One, by taking it seriously. My priorities are public safety, victims' rights, and systemic changes. And one of the ways I want to accomplish those priorities is really by prioritizing the prosecution of repeat, serious, and violent offenders. Those are the three types of offenders that I really want to target, especially because those types of offenders repeatedly commit acts of crime and violence that terrorize our communities and our neighborhoods. And they make us feel less safe. And when we see these individuals getting away with things and getting slaps on wrists, it makes us lose confidence in our criminal justice system. And it makes us wonder, what's the point of doing anything? What's the point? Why don't we just take justice upon ourselves, right? Recently, there have been examples of people advocating for vigilante justice, right? Like, you know, let's just solve this problem ourselves. And I don't think that's ideal. Right? We have a sort of a system of law, checks and balances. We live in a civil society because we don't want people just to be like, I know what's right and I'm going to take care of it, right? That could lead to unchecked violence. And I don't think that's healthy for a democratic society like ours.
Exactly.
I think we need a criminal justice system that is serious about fighting crime and will say, we're going to put our foot down. You don't get to keep writing your rap sheet as if it's like a PhD dissertation. Your rap sheet should not be like an inch thick. That's just ridiculous. You could have spent those opportunities and time, studying, working, getting vocational training, turning your life around. And it's not acceptable that we just kind of tolerate those types of things.
It's almost like in the past, or what we're going through right now, is that we are accepting bad behavior.
Right.
And it's becoming the norm. And I agree with you. I think the public is getting very, very tired.
Yeah. And I think it ultimately goes back to incentives again. People respond to incentives, right? When they see that there are carrots and there are sticks, they're going to choose what's in their optimal interest.
Right.
Right? People are rational thinking people, so they're going to choose the best choice for their lives.
I think so too. Is there any way to track how many misdemeanor charges have been prosecuted?
There is. I'm sure DA Rosen could just pull up a report in terms of misdemeanor cases or charges that have been processed, especially during his tenure. I think we could improve that a lot. I think the last time his office issued a crime report was actually 2020 or 2019, somewhere around that area, probably because we've seen an increase in crime. And he probably doesn't want to share a report right now with all the latest statistics about crime throughout the county. So if we improve the IT infrastructure, the way we look at case management, the way we collect evidence, the way we manage prosecutions electronically, I think we can gather that data a lot more effectively and be transparent about it.
Great, thank you. That would really help, I think, for the public to see how things are actually going. We have learned that both our law enforcement and minority communities have been thrown into a political whirlwind in the past few years. There is no infrastructure to pick up the pieces after the elections, or the political whirlwind is done. Bridging the gap seems reactionary, only an afterthought until something goes wrong. This is a problem for both law enforcement and disenfranchised community members. Our future DA should have a plan to bridge the gap. What will you do to bridge the gap between minority communities and law enforcement?
So race is an important issue, and racism is a sad reality that exists even today. And as a DA's office, as a partner to communities and law enforcement agencies, we need to care about race issues and racism issues. One of the saddest facts of DA Rosen's administration is that his entire executive committee right now, the key decision makers in his office, all of the assistant district attorneys in his office, are all white. Over the last 12 years, he has not invested significantly in a talent pipeline in his office that's going to lead to a diverse executive staff. I think that's sad in Santa Clara County, one of the most diverse, one of the richest counties also. You know, as an Asian American, I'm very proud of our county. We're about approximately 40% Asian now. And not a single one of us is at the highest levels of this office currently. And I think that's just very sad. I think our office needs to reflect the diversity of the community, not just at the bottom, right? And this is what like corporate America likes to get away with also, just, you know, diversity at the bottom. Diversity at the bottom is easy. You just hire a few people, entry-level people. It's retention. It's rising through the ranks that matter, right? Like how many people are you cultivating and nurturing so that they can grow in their careers and really build long-lasting relationships with the community, right? Those people at the top are going to be the people who have been at the office the longest, have the best community ties, have the most credibility when they go out into the community, and are going to be the recognizable faces of the community as well. So when the community sees that the DA's office takes issues like race seriously, I think they're going to be a lot more responsive. Hey, that guy looks like me. Hey, that guy's out in our community. Hey, they really care about these things. Two additional points on this. I've been going out into the community a lot these days as I've been campaigning. And one thing that I've really learned and recognized is people are yearning for prosecutors to be actually out there in the community and understanding their community. They feel like we don't know their needs. We don't understand their neighborhoods. We don't understand their communities. Like when I ask them, like, when's the last time they saw any DA, they don't even know what a DA is. And sometimes they're like, we've never seen a DA come out here and talk to us. And so I think that as we think about sort of innovating the office, let's think about how to organize the office based on neighborhoods and communities so that just as there's like neighborhood policing where people develop close relationships with the local police officers that serve them, they also develop close relationships with the prosecutors that serve them also, so that the prosecutors know the repeat players around the area, they know the law enforcement agencies, they know the small business owners, and they know the stakeholders who are going to be sort of telling them what's going on in the community. The second thing is, if we care about the race of defendants and getting racial justice for them, or justice in general for them, we also have to care about the race of victims. Because as I have experienced and seen throughout our community, a lot of victimized people in our community come from low-income background and minority backgrounds. So people of color are being affected by crime. And so if we care about crime and if we care about how we treat defendants who are people of color, we should also care about victims who are also people of color as well.
All right, thank you. Prop 47. In 2014, California voters approved Proposition 47, the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act, which reduced certain low-level property and drug offenses from felonies to misdemeanors. The proposition requires the allocation of savings from reduced incarceration into rehabilitation and crime prevention programs. However, this legislation has come under scrutiny from legislators and law enforcement officials who claim the measure may be contributing to increases in property crime and other crime. Do you believe that Prop 47 made our schools and neighborhoods safer?
No. You know, I totally advocate for the spirit of Prop 47, which is safe neighborhoods and schools. I love that idea. Who would not love that idea? But what Prop 47 really did, in addition to pushing limits up and making it harder to prosecute certain types of thefts, is it removed discretion from prosecutors. So in the past, prosecutors could treat repeat, serious, and violent offenders in a different way. For example, by charging them with a felony if it was appropriate, based on their criminal history, based on the specific acts that they committed. But now that discretion has largely been removed, and so repeat players can continually commit similar offenses over and over and over again and get away with it. And we can't change the punishment for them because they've adapted now. They know how the laws work, and they feel like they know how to get away with just enough so that they don't receive a heavy punishment. And that's not acceptable. You know, as we all know, property crime is up. People don't feel safe in their retail. They don't feel safe in their homes. They feel like their personal property, their real property are all being affected these days. Everybody knows someone who's been broken into, whether it's a car or a home. I talk to business owners who have been repeatedly broken into. Some of them have literally boarded up their doors and windows, even though they're fully operational, because they say that once they replace it, criminals just come and break it again. And they can't afford to keep replacing it over and over again.
Exactly.
So this affects people's livelihoods. I know this is another example of people saying, oh, it's just quality of life. Who cares? It's just a misdemeanor. It's just a broken door. This is people's livelihoods. These are immigrants who are striving for the American dream, who are trying to make a living, who are trying to help their families, and prosper in a very expensive region of the country. And this kind of criminality and our tolerance of this type of criminality is making it much more difficult for people to really succeed here.
Yes, I agree with you on that one. Jeff Rosen, our current DA, along with George Gascon and Paul Gallegos, were the only DAs in the entire state to endorse Prop 47. That means out of the 58 other district attorneys in California, Jeff Rosen was one of 3 to support it. Jeff Rosen recently announced that Prop 47 was working as planned. Do you concur, or do you feel it should be amended?
It is not working as planned. It should definitely be amended so that, like I said before, we have discretion to go after repeat serious and violent offenders, right? Prosecutors need tools. And one of the things that I hold very dear is we are law enforcers, not law creators. We're not policymakers. We're not social workers. We have a very specific sphere of power. And so we can't do anything until the legislature gives us that power, right? A lot of prosecutors running these days say, oh, I'm going to do this or not do this. And it's like, no, actually the law requires you to do certain things and requires you not to do certain things. And it's your job to take your oath seriously. And so we need to take our oath seriously, but we can't do everything on our own. Right? We need the legislature's help. We need the public's help to have the tools necessary to address these particular types of issues. In a recent interview with the Mercury News, Jeff gave himself a grade of an A. And to me, it was just shocking. I was like, wow, first of all, the lack of humility, not even an A minus, some room for improvement in your, office or anything like that. And just the sheer audacity that when crime is up, when people feel unsafe, when people are yearning for change, you think, oh, I'm doing a fantastic job. I deserve an A. And it just shows how out of touch he is with reality. He is not in the neighborhoods. He's not in the communities that are being victimized repeatedly. And, it's easy to live, in Los Altos and, in a nice home, a fancy home that, doesn't really experience crime, and to sort of pontificate about how great he's doing in terms of social justice reforms and whatnot. But the practical realities is that people are hurting, and he's not seeing it. And we definitely need to change things.
Right. Do you believe Prop 47 played a role in the number of unhoused people?
I think that's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I think that Prop 47 certainly made it easier for certain unhoused or homeless individuals to keep committing petty thefts, and that would allow them to sustain, I guess, a certain type of lifestyle. I think one of the saddest yet kind of funny things I heard last time at the Gilroy City Council meeting, or the town hall meeting that I attended, was that homeless people are now putting up no trespassing signs.
Yes.
And to me, it's like, man, yeah, they are trespassing, and then they are putting up their own no trespassing signs. And to me, it's like, wow, again, going back to incentives, people respond to incentives. So if they feel like, hey, we can, sustain a certain type of lifestyle and keep doing particular things, and we're going to be okay, they're going to keep up that lifestyle. And we need to show them that there is something better, right? There is something better that they could be striving for. And we actually want them to strive for that better thing. I don't want to see people homeless. I hate that.
I do too.
I want people to be succeeding. I want them to have jobs. I want them to have families. I want them to have hope and aspirations. And I want to be able to, go up to them and not be in fear either, right? That, oh my gosh, they might do something, or, are they, currently under the influence, whatever's going on. Like, I want us to be a community that's prosperous together, and not like a us versus them mentality. And I want us to provide them opportunities to really succeed.
Right, great. Crime often goes unreported now because police discourage victims from not filing reports because our district attorney does not file charges. As district attorney, what will you do with serial misdemeanor offenders? And you kind of talked about that already, but maybe
repeat offenders we have to take seriously. We have to be able to know who they are, first of all, by collecting that data, by improving our IT infrastructure, right? But once we know who they are and once we see them repeatedly committing offenses, we got to put our foot down, right? We can't just keep saying, oh, another misdemeanor.
Exactly.
Oh, another misdemeanor. As long as we have the tools that are available, right? If we don't have the tools to hold them accountable, the best that we can do is just seek maximum sentences.
Right, right. In 2016, Prop 57 was approved by more than 64% of voters, increasing opportunities for state prisoners to be considered for parole and time credits. It also allows for judges, rather than prosecutors, to decide whether to try juveniles in adult court. How do you stand on Prop 57?
I have a lot of mixed feelings about Prop 57. Obviously, I don't like the reality that some of our prisons and jails might be overcrowded, right? If I were to be convicted of something and sent to a facility, I would want to be in a facility that's safe, right? That's not overcrowded, that's not filled with violence, that's not filled with corruption, bad issues. So I understand the desire for, reducing the overcrowding of our prisons. However, we have to do it in a balanced way, right, that checks for things. And one of the things that Prop 57 did was it allowed people to get released early. And one of the things that is really problematic these days is sentences don't really mean anything anymore, right? Like when people say like, oh, you're getting a 10-year sentence, 15-year sentence, 20-year sentence, and victims are entitled to truth in sentencing. It's actually enshrined in our Constitution, California's Constitution, Article 1, Section 28. It's Marques law. And one of the things that victims are entitled to is truth in sentencing, so that victims know, hey, if someone committed a crime against me, I want to know how much time they're getting. But that time is like meaningless now. Sadly, we had another mass shooting in Sacramento recently, and one of the individuals who was involved, as far as the news report seemed to indicate, is someone who was supposed to be serving a pretty lengthy sentence, and I don't think he even served half of that sentence, right? And so we really need to think about all these credits and paroles and early releases that we're giving to people and really think, are we giving it to the right people, right? Or are we just doing it out of convenience just to reduce our numbers?
Correct. Right? I know as we were talking about this, I was thinking of the Sacramento shooting and the man who did get released early. I wonder how that probation board is feeling right now.
Yeah. And, with regards to the other piece regarding juveniles of Prop 57, I think there is some issue of separation of powers because prosecutors are the ones who bring charges. And when judges are now deciding how cases are going to be prosecuted, to me, that's a bit of a separation of powers issue. I think each branch of government should stick to what its main role is. And a prosecutor's office is to enforce laws and prosecute cases. And I think having judges interfere, it is that system now, but to me, this idea runs a little bit contrary to separation of powers.
Jeff Rosen, our current DA, was one of 3 in the entire state to endorse Prop 36, which reformed the 3 strikes law and allowed thousands of nonviolent offenders to safely be released from state prison. However, it is important to keep in mind what constitutes a nonviolent crime in California. Assault with a deadly weapon, first-degree burglary, domestic violence, and human trafficking are just some crimes currently classified as nonviolent in California. Where do you stand on Prop 36?
Yeah, I think the very narrow class of violent felonies that we see under Penal Code 667.5 is shameful. How can domestic violence not be a violent crime?
Mm-hmm.
How can human trafficking not be a violent crime? How can burglarizing someone's home not be a violent crime? How can having a knife and running after someone not be a violent crime? That's an assault with a deadly weapon. To me, it's just like, who is writing these laws? So that's one problem. The other thing is, again, like Prop 57 with Prop 36, I can again get behind the spirit, which is we need to reduce overcrowding, or we need to address overcrowding. That is a real issue that we need to address, but we can't just keep doing it by just, conveniently excluding certain types of acts and saying, oh, it's nonviolent, so, we're not going to treat it as a serious or a violent felony anymore. We really need to sort of be careful about how we classify things and really think critically about how is the public also going to perceive this? That, you can commit this act and it's violent, and then this act, it's not violent? Like, how does that work? And again, Prop 36 is about repeat offenders. I don't have much sympathy for repeat offenders because all of us, we all make mistakes.
Right.
We all deserve second chances. But with repeat offenders, especially, if they're not young, they've chosen a particular life. And they've decided to squander second chances, third chances. And I know in our county, we give them way more than second chances, like seventh, eighth, ninth grant of probation. I mean, come on. And they're choosing a life of either committing serious crimes or violent crimes. And I think we need to put our foot down.
In all these three cases, the voters have voted to pass these propositions. And it just kind of makes me wonder if the voter is getting as educated as he or she can on what the ultimate damage is that these propositions can do, or are people just blindly voting yes and going down, or voting no? I mean, there's a disconnect here,
right,
in what the voters are saying and then what they're doing at the polls. It just makes me think that we have to do a lot more educating when these propositions come on the ballot.
For sure. And, I think I place the lion's share of blame on the people who are creating a lot of these propositions because they're conning the public. They're mislabeling, misleading people, right? When Prop 47 is labeled Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act, I mean...
who's going to vote against that?
Right. If you look at the title, do I want safe neighborhoods and schools? Yes, of course I want that. And of course, they're only going to give the highlights that make everything sound like, oh, everything's going to work out. We're going to save billions of dollars and everybody's going to have a safe neighborhood. I mean, who would not want a dream like that?
Exactly. They're not telling the whole truth. I agree with you 100%.
Right.
Because... how is releasing a criminal to the streets creating a safe neighborhood and a safe school? And I know one of your opponents, Khan, always talks about how when you arrest a child at a young age, the school is a direct avenue to prisons. And as a teacher, a retired teacher, I'm saying, wait a minute, there are a lot of other ways that there are interventions to not have that happen.
Right.
I don't think anyone who believes schools are a direct pipeline to prison understands what the thinking is.
Right.
So it's just crazy.
Yeah.
Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon has refused to let his deputy district attorneys attend parole hearings to support the victims and their families. What would your policy be?
The complete opposite. We should absolutely be doing everything we can to support victims. I understand that we technically represent the people of the state of California as sovereignty, and we're technically not the victim's personal lawyer, but we fight for them, right? And we need to be in court in these hearings for them, and stand up for them and stand with them also, right? So if they want to say something, if they want to, share their stories, their harms, their experiences, we should empower them. If they want us to advocate for them, happy to do so. But if they want to talk, we should be there to support them and empower them to do that.
What is your stance on zero bail?
I understood why during COVID it was necessary. Again, going back to overcrowding in jails and prisons, especially during a pandemic emergency, we don't want overcrowding because people could literally die from contracting COVID-19. However, $0 bail, especially as COVID conditions improve, and especially as we keep seeing repeat offenders, we need to take things seriously. We can't just say, oh, this is a quality of life crime, or oh, it's just a misdemeanor, so you're going to get $0. That's not acceptable. Just as, it's almost like college admissions officers. They look at the whole of someone. We need to be doing the same thing. And I think defense attorneys would actually advocate for that we look at the whole of someone. What is their entire history? What act have you committed? And really evaluate each situation independently and individually so that we can figure out what steps do we need to take to make sure you come back to court, you don't commit another offense while you're out pending these charges, you're not a threat to the victim or to the public at large. So we really need to be critically thinking about those things.
Thank you. Did you support the building of the new Santa Clara County Jail?
I was not a part of the decision-making process, but I do support it, especially if we're serious about reducing overcrowding, right? How can we reduce overcrowding if we don't have space? We need to have spaces available, and we need to also make sure that our jails are up to date, right? That they're not just deteriorating or old buildings where, that are based on kind of old ways of doing things. We should have the most sort of up-to-date facilities that serve our public.
Right. I just thought of a question that I want to ask you because this bothers me, and I asked Rosen this question. During COVID, none of the convalescent patients could get out of a convalescent hospital. And in fact, many of them, it was almost like prison because none of the family members could come in and visit them.
Yeah.
And yet the staff could come and go because they had to take care of the people, and yet the staff had to go home to their families. And then we had criminals in prison that were there because of a crime that they had committed. But they got released because of COVID. In my mind, that did not make sense because they should have been kept there in a shutdown where no visitors could come and see them. I know someone said to me, well, that would be inhumane treatment. I said, well, then why is it humane treatment for the elderly who really needed that support system with their families?
Yeah.
But it was inhumane for prisoners to not see people from the outside coming in. How did you feel about that release? Because honestly speaking, a lot of them went to the encampments and crime really soared, and many of them went back to committing the same crimes that took them into the prisons.
The inconsistencies and the hypocrisies during COVID drove me nuts, right? Because you would have politicians doing one thing and saying one thing, and then a complete different reality going on, right? So masks are great. No, masks are terrible. No masks for everybody. Everybody needs a mask. Everybody should double mask.
I could eat at the French Laundry with no mask. Yeah.
So COVID just created kind of a recipe for hypocrisy, inconsistency, irrationality. And I hope we're emerging from the fog of that now and thinking more critically. And as I talk to normal people, regular people, residents, business owners, I think they get it.
Good.
They understand, look, we can't just keep pushing this revolving door. They are fed up. They're like, our lives are at stake and it seems like no one cares. And I think that's very sad, especially given how much taxes they pay also.
And not only that, but when push comes to shove, the business owner, especially a large company, is not going to take this loss. It comes down to you and me and all of the shoppers that go into that store. And I think we have a segment of society that doesn't quite get that they're paying higher prices due to the thefts that are happening and the damage to the store. So overall, I really hope there is a change in California's thinking and people begin to realize all this is hurting everybody, not just a certain small segment.
Right.
Can you talk a minute about filing enhancements?
Yes. So under our penal code, there are a variety of enhancements you can file against an individual. For example, if they use a gun or if they fire a gun, or if they inflict a certain type of injury upon someone. So I think enhancements are important. However, we really need to look at every situation individually, right? For situations like guns, I think enhancements are great. Because if you're illegally using a gun, especially like a ghost gun, and you're firing rounds or you're shooting at people or hurting people with guns, I think those types of enhancements, which increase your sentence, are excellent tools that we have. However, we also have to be careful about overusing all of these enhancements, because I think one of the pushbacks that we've gotten from our legislature, as well as sort of social activists, is that, hey, you're just, racking up enhancements left and right. Like, you're just overcharging them. And that's true. We have to really be careful about the math that we do with these enhancements and think about, is this just, right? Is this appropriate in this particular situation? Are we just throwing the book at them because we can? Or are we doing this because this is appropriate given the conduct, their history, and how we want to protect our public at large? When I worked for DA Rosen, senior prosecutors in the office would tell me things like, oh, we're charging this only to scare the defendant. Or, oh, we're only charging this because we just want to get a plea deal out of them. And to me, it's like, no, that's unethical. First of all, you can't do that. Like, we take an oath as prosecutors only to charge things that we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So if you're charging things for any other reason than for ethical evidentiary reasons and for the pursuit of justice, then you're not doing an ethical job. And so for me, that type of thinking needs to be cleaned out in the office, right? We need to think about, what can we charge appropriately and what should we charge, right, based on individual circumstances, and let's hold ourselves to the highest standards so that when the public sees the document with all the enhancements and all the charges, they go, wow, we get it. He is prosecuting someone who has committed some serious offenses, caused some serious harm, and he should be put away for a serious amount of time. But for other people, they don't think, wow, they're just going heavy-handed. They're just throwing the book at someone just because they can, right? I think we need to have that level of legitimacy and trust with our community who believes that we're doing the right thing always.
Great, I like that. Can you talk a minute about diversion programs? How will you handle people who drop out and fail to comply?
I think diversion programs are excellent for first-time offenders, non-serious, non-violent offenders, especially for our youth also. I'm not opposed to diversion programs per se. I think that it's a great second chance because it's basically saying, hey, if you fulfill a certain number of conditions, right, whether it's community service or getting treatment or counseling or whatnot, and you stay out of trouble for a period of amount of time, and you come back to court and report regularly on your progress and whatnot, we will wipe it out from your criminal history. How amazing is that, right? Literally, it cannot be even reported, I believe, to the best of my knowledge, it can't even be reported to colleges anymore, right? We're going to wipe it out from your criminal history. So that's a great a carrot that we have, right? Look, if you want that second chance in life, take it. People who fail out of those programs, people who don't take advantage of that second chance, people who keep committing offenses, I think giving them another diversion program is just ludicrous, right? Because we've given it to you and you decided you're going to squander it. So why would we do the same thing again? Right? Again, incentives. You keep giving the same person the same thing over and over again, they're going to keep coming back to you.
Right. Or I guess you could say if someone, dropped out of the program, failed to comply, committed another crime, but then you said if you have a clean record for 10 years, then we will allow you, to maybe erase some of we can erase part of your criminal record.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just thinking of way back when I was teaching, and as part of one of my programs, I had a guest speaker come in who was a felon.
Yeah.
And it was when we were teaching the gang unit. And he was such a valuable resource to these students who were involved in gangs. To hear it from someone who had been in the prison system, had all these crimes, he paid his restitution, he paid his debt to society, and he was doing something very, very valuable. And then the law was passed that no felons could be in a school, and then he was not able. And I thought how sad that was, because he turned his life around,
Right.
and yet he wasn't being able to be forgiven,
Right.
even though he's leading a clean life. So something like that, I would, I could say.
I would strongly support things like that.
Yeah.
After people have paid their time, right, and have reintegrated into society and are becoming productive, thriving members of our society, let's not make it more difficult for them to live their lives and become part of us, right, part of our community, and really, represent the best of us, right? Let's not saddle them unnecessarily for extended periods of time. However, for other people, right, that we need to hold accountable, we're going to hold you accountable.
Exactly.
Right? It's finding that balance that I think is important. And when people see that prosecutors advocate for a philosophy like that, I think people can really get behind that. It's like, hey, yeah, if you commit a crime, you're going to do the time, right? But after that, if you've been held accountable, yeah, come back into our community.
Right.
We'd love to have a beer with you. Yes, don't commit any more crimes, coach for people, do things, educate, mentor, get married, have a job, build a family. I think that's fantastic for everybody.
And I think that would turn some people around to realize that they could, they made a bad mistake, but now they could do it. But I agree, the accountability has to be there.
Right.
Do you believe in the broken window theory? Do you believe that disorder and incivility within a community leads to subsequent occurrences of serious crime?
So I think we touched upon it earlier with regards to quality of life issues. I generally subscribe to that in the sense of, I do think if people continually engage in these types of smaller acts, they feel like they can get away with it and they start committing more serious crimes. I have seen instances in the past where intervening at that early stage is life-saving. It actually prevents significant things from happening. And it's often the times when we can gather important intelligence about people, right? Figure out who are these people, why are they doing things, what are they doing, right? And figure out how to intervene early so that we don't see the serious things that happen later.
Where do you stand on trying juveniles as adults?
So this is something that I have some mixed feelings about, in the sense of that, one, I taught kids for an extended period of time. I taught maybe over 40 classes, about over 1,200 students. So I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for students, especially middle school, high school kids. I think kids have tremendous potential to change also. So for the vast majority of juveniles, my hope is, let's treat you as a juvenile. Let's keep you out of the criminal justice system. Let's make sure that you understand your conduct was unacceptable, but that there's hope, that you can change, you can become a thriving adult in our community. There are individuals, however, who are juveniles that commit heinous crimes. And under current laws, only 16 and above can be prosecuted as adults now. And I think that's a fair balance. Right? If it's only 16 and 17-year-olds, right, 2 years right under 18 years old, and you're committing heinous, violent crimes, right, such as murder, I think individually, case by case, depending on the circumstances, it can be appropriate for you to be prosecuted as an adult.
Right.
But again, it really depends on each kid, right? Like, I would want to evaluate each kid really individually and look at their particular circumstances and what they did and the harm that they inflicted.
All right. One last question, because I know Jeff Rosen keeps talking about this.
Yes.
And I want the public to hear your viewpoint on this. Jeff loves to tell everyone he fired you from his office. And then that's all he says. He doesn't go into any details on why. Why were you fired?
So I was fired because I was helping victims. I was standing up for victims. I was giving them a voice when they were being ignored by Jeff. It all started with an article that I wrote advocating for Asian Americans who were experiencing tremendous amounts of violence, especially last year. I wrote that article around Valentine's Day. And this was before the Atlanta shootings even happened. And so I wanted the public to pay attention, especially in the South Bay, as we saw the incidents happening in San Francisco and Oakland, East Bay. You know, I knew it was going to come down here, and it did. Of course it did. And I wanted our public officials and the public to really care about that and to really think critically, are all these criminal justice reforms that they're just pushing through the legislature at a rapid rate every single week, are they appropriate? Are they balanced? Are they thinking through all of the things that are happening? Based on that article, obviously it set off a thing with me and Jeff. Jeff did not like that article. Jeff came after me for that article. Jeff found other reasons to just continually just keep coming after me. And obviously I criticized him for coming after me for that article because I believed I was standing up for victims. I was giving them a voice, and I was speaking up for people who were tired of seeing the legislature just passing laws over and over again that were harming our communities. And so it even culminated, you know, there was a mass shooting that happened in May with the VTA employee.
Yes.
And I even went there to assist the victims. Our office had even set up a victim assistance center with the Red Cross, a public building, to come, you know, help out, do anything that you can. And I went there to assist, and he said that he didn't believe I came to help.
Do you think there was a jealousy involved? You know, where an ego was attacked? You know, that he wasn't doing enough when these crimes were being committed, and he felt he should, and you brought it to everyone's attention. I mean, that's hearsay that we don't know. I'm speculating, getting into his mind, but
Jeff values loyalty. I've spoken about this jingle that's in the office. If you're not one of Rosen's chosen, you will be frozen. And so I got to experience it quite directly and viscerally. As you know, as I began to speak out, I saw him do the 180 on me and figure out, how can we get rid of this prosecutor now? By all means that, you know, he could throw at me. And it's just ironic that every kind of discipline that I experienced was in the context of me standing up for victims, helping victims, trying to be an asset to victims, and Rosen just rejecting that.
Daniel, I am so impressed with you and your answers, and I want to thank you so much for coming here today, doing the interview, allowing people to get to know you. I think you as district attorney would make a big difference in Santa Clara County, and I wish you the very best of luck. Thank you so much, and I hope all of you remember his name when it comes time to vote in June in the primary, because if you win 51%, you're automatically done. You've won. But if none of the three candidates do, it's the top two that go into the November election. So I'm hoping for a 51% or greater victory for you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very, very much.